On a Sunday night, a week after my inauguration, I used the radio to tell you about the banking crisis, about the measures we were taking to meet it. In that way, I tried to make clear to the country various facts that might otherwise have been misunderstood, and in general to provide a means of understanding, which I believe did much to restore confidence. Tonight, 8 weeks later, I come for the second time to give you my report, in the same spirit and by the same means, to tell you about what we have been doing and what we are planning to do.
As 1933 ended, the business of RCA was improving and its deficit narrowing. Although the economy continued to languish despite the New Deal legislation passed at President Roosevelt's behest. Unlike film and theater, radio provided diversion and escapism for the American audience at no additional cost. It also provided lifelines to the real world through the fireside chats that President Roosevelt often broadcast. Sales were stimulated by RCA's introduction of a new line of portable radios, sold for as little as $20. It allowed people to take communication and entertainment on the go. The advertising industry, desperately trying to gain access to what little of the buying public remained, increasingly were using radio as its chief communications tool. By 1934, David Sarnoff had returned RCA to profitability. Gross sales were $79 million. Net earnings were $4.25 million. Dividends on Class A preferred stocks were paid up, and the company's treasury possessed a surplus of $13.5 million. Sarnoff used his success to turn his thoughts towards television, something he'd believed in since 1923.
It is now 12 years since this apparatus showed the transmission of outline images to the public for the first time. This is the scanning disc with its lenses.
That year, a Scottish pioneer named John Logie Baird had developed a mechanical disc transmitter. 2 years later, he launched a series of blurry test transmissions to receivers placed in London department stores. It was the first public television demonstration. Next, a Dayton, Ohio engineer named Charles Francis Jenkins had been working on television experiments since the middle of the 1920s. Jenkins' technology was primitive. It employed prismatic rings that rotated horizontally and vertically, scanning a film across a photoelectric cell. The result was a blurry silhouette reproduced on a 6x8-inch screen. Jenkins obtained an experimental license from the Federal Radio Commission to begin regular telecast over Washington station W3XK. Almost overnight, bankers underwrote a $10 million investment in the Jenkins Television Corporation with a capitalization of 1 million shares. Jenkins' mechanical disc receivers were assembled for sale through radio retailers and priced from $85 to $135. He also offered a do-it-yourself kit for $47.50. GE and AT&T soon jumped in. By the end of 1928, the Federal Radio Commission had granted 28 experimental television licenses. But two things stopped the industry's growth. First was the Great Depression, and second was a growing belief, Sarnoff chief amongst, that the mechanical concept on which television was being built was the wrong technological approach.
In 1923, I demonstrated a complete electronic picture transmission.
In 1929, Sarnoff met with a Westinghouse scientist named Vladimir Zworykin.
By television, we can see the things which is impossible to see normally with our eye. Something which was too far, too close, too dangerous, or too impossible to...
Back in 1923, Zworykin had invented a cathode ray scanning tube known as the iconoscope. That gave television cameras an electronic eye. It promised a quantum leap over the mechanical scanning apparatuses. Sarnoff pledged to underwrite Zworykin's research effort. Within a year, corporate unification allowed total control of experimental research to come under RCA and Sarnoff's control. Sarnoff would often visit RCA's engineers at their Camden, New Jersey research facility. He later said, "It was a question of confidence. The technical people had to know management was behind them. I let them know. I believed in them more than they believed in themselves. In 1932, sales of Charles Jenkins TV receivers dried up, and Sarnoff was able to acquire the defunct venture for $500,000. That year, RCA field engineers were testing the iconoscope pickup tube linked to a transmitter installed on the roof of the Camden Research Plant. Still pictures were broadcast via ultra-high frequency over a few miles distance to a prototype set equipped with an experimental cathode ray receiving tube. It would come to be known as the kinescope. An RCA transmitting antenna was implanted at the top of the Empire State Building, and several receivers were scattered about the New York metropolitan area in the homes of RCA technical personnel. As interest mounted, Congress passed the Communications Act of 1934, abolishing the Federal Radio Commission in favor of the new Federal Communications Commission. The word television was left out, but so was the word radio. In 1935, NBC renovated a small studio, 3H, at Radio City for television broadcasts, and on July 7, 1936, they went live for the first time.
This is station W2XK, an experimental transmitter of the National Broadcasting Company. We are operating on a frequency of 52 megacycles by authority of the Federal Communications Commission. A test program follows.
General Harvard, I'm sure this occasion must be as gratifying to you as it is to me and to the rest of us. Ever since you joined the Radio Corporation of America some 14 years ago, you have heard us talk about this new child television. You've watched it come from the cradle and learn to creep, and today, I'm glad to say, marks a new epoch in the development of this child.
Two-way transmitters soon followed between New York and Philadelphia. The validity of television networking was being established. Sarnoff felt that the leader must lead in all areas of this new industry, from the construction of transmitters and mobile equipment, to studio construction and networking, to equipment servicing, to the creation of entertainment and informational programming. It was a total system approach to television. As this began, RCA got the FCC to approve a Radio Manufacturers Association Engineering Committee to seek a technical consensus on an industry standard for radio and television sets. Sarnoff wanted to ensure that he could control the entire emerging television market. By 1937, the first mobile RCA television van appeared on the streets of New York, containing 2 cameras and a relay transmitter. It permitted mobile pickups. In July, NBC announced plans to begin experimental telecasts at Madison Square Garden prize fights.
Ring announcer Joe Humphreys introduces lightweight champion Tony Canzoneri. Tony, at 136.5 pounds...
But RCA's rivals amongst radio manufacturers, Philco and Zenith, knew what Sarnoff wanted to do, and also saw no reason to rush television's commercial introduction to the American market when radio sales had restored their profit margins. The FCC agreed to address the questions of technical standards and channel allocations. Sarnoff pressed for a quick resolution. Zenith launched a trade advertising campaign warning that television was premature both for economic and technical reasons, when their print ads showed Sarnoff as a televisionary ape trampling on the prostrate corpses of the radio industry. Sarnoff vowed that he'd no longer compromise. In October of 1938, at the Radio Manufacturers Association board meeting, he informed them that the inaugural program would coincide with the opening of the 1939 World's Fair. David Sarnoff was taking a huge gamble. Because there was no FCC commercial standard approval, the only license Sarnoff had was an experimental one, and advertising, therefore, wasn't allowed. His hope was that the public fervor would force the industry's hand.